One of the biggest mistakes we see brands make is not completely understanding the fulfillment by Amazon or FBA fee line item that comes out of their disbursements and comes out of their unit economics and their margins on Amazon. It's one of the biggest gotchas that Amazon has, and no fault of their own. It's a very complex program, lots of variables go into it. In today's video, we're going to understand what goes into those costs, how to avoid FBA fee changes, how to maximize your margins and stay ahead of the competition. Amazon's Fulfillment by Amazon program, or FBA as we'll refer to it from here on out, is really the primary way that brands should be fulfilling their products when they sell them on Amazon. What does that mean? That means that you're sending your products in bulk into Amazon's warehouses, and they're distributing them all throughout their massive warehouse network. They're storing the items, and then when someone clicks buy on Amazon.com using that Prime badge, right? Then what Amazon's doing, workers pulling off the shelf, they're putting it in a box and getting it to that customer's house. Customer loves it. The thing is, brands pay that fee that Amazon charges to fulfill that item, and most brands have no idea the impact or the control they can have around that fee, even though it's a standard fee from Amazon. And we're going to talk about that and really understanding the basics of what is this whole Fulfillment by Amazon program and what is the spirit of Amazon's rules and regulations behind the program, and then looking at maybe some of the prep that products need to go through before they even get into Amazon's warehouse. If things need to be packaged a certain way or have certain labeling requirements. And again, Amazon is very specific around all that stuff. And then brands also have a struggle understanding, Amazon calls them size tiers. So essentially buckets that products fall into, and then there's further fees down within that, but these buckets that products fall into and how much brands can control around that when they have certain packaging design, maybe strictly for e-commerce or maybe just for Amazon. And that goes right into multi-packs and bundles as well. So if you're going to take 2 or 3 of the same item and put them together in one box or one envelope, how are you going to do that? And then what are the actual dimensions and weight of that going to be? And how is Amazon going to measure them when they get into the warehouse? And then maybe you have a new product you're launching or a second product or third product you're launching on Amazon. How can you design your new packaging, right, to really be thoughtful and considerate in maximizing your margin? So those are the big key components of understanding this whole Fulfillment by Amazon program and how you can manage that. But first, we kind of understand what is Amazon's whole view or thought process or methodology when it comes to asking the things they ask of sellers and the kind of the rules and regulations that go along with the FBA program. So before we go into any of the fun stuff when it comes down to these FBA fees and programs, let's take a step back and understand Amazon's methodology. So their number one core value is the customer, right? Customer first. And so they have a customer first mentality, and they view their customer as that end customer that's buying a product on Amazon. And so they want to do everything they can to maximize that customer's experience. It's very easy for brands to fall into a trap of blaming Amazon. Why are they making us do this? It ultimately boils down to Amazon wants that customer to have a great customer experience. And so the reason they make you label things a certain way or prep things a certain way is because of that. Another factor to consider is the enormous size and scope of Amazon's logistics network, let's just call it, or the FBA program, right? They have built hundreds of warehouses, sortation stations, everything else around the country. And I don't think people realize that Amazon is pretty much just as much of a logistics company now as they are an e-commerce company, right? And that goes to show with things they're doing in multi-channel fulfillment program, right? And now there's the buy with Prime program, right? Again, when you have that complex of network, you've got to have standardized process, standardized rules, regulations, and you can't deviate from that. It's a numbers game at that point, right? And we've seen that with customers or the clients we work with, where they'll be out of that range a little bit and Amazon will slap on the wrist. And even though the brand really hasn't done anything intentionally wrong, it's just it's fallen out of that number range that Amazon's looking for. Let's talk about the main sections here of what brands need to know. One of the biggest ones is prep for your products on Amazon. What do I mean by prep? So the things need to happen before Amazon puts it on the shelf. So that can happen a couple different ways. It can happen at your factory or manufacturer or co-packer that's doing your item. They can actually physically label the product a certain way and or package it a certain way. It could happen at a 3PL that you use, and they're going to charge you obviously fees for this, and your co-packer and everything else will as well. And so maybe it's like, hey, this product needs to be bubble wrapped, and your 3PL is going to do that for every item when they put it in a box, send it off to Amazon, whatever it may be. The third way that you get to do it is you can have Amazon do it. So you can actually, for some of the prep requirements, you can say, hey, Amazon, you go ahead and do this for us. Now there's costs to that as well, and those costs have actually increased recently. They were actually pretty competitive. There's no right or wrong answer to say what's going to be best for you. you need to explore the costs of each, of having it done at manufacturing, having it done by 3PL, having it done by Amazon, but also the impact it may have. If you have a pallet of 1,000 units, it's small, thin items, and all of a sudden you're gonna have to label every single one of those because Amazon's forcing you to do it. They're gonna forcing you to put a label over the UPC code, as they sometimes do. It doesn't make sense for someone to open up all those prepackaged items that have done that way. Have Amazon do it if you can, right? Amazon will actually, you can pay them to label. Again, there's a cost to that, but it may make sense to just have them labels they pull out of the boxes and put on the shelves at their warehouse. Another huge consideration is these Amazon size tiers, and what that is that buckets of sizes that products fall into. So like small standard size is anything less than like a quarter of an inch thick, and I think it's 12 inches and a certain weight, right? And like there's a standard size, which probably most products fit into. Then there's oversized, and actually just added an extra large categories. Each of those buckets of size tiers have different like maximums, right? So if you're over 18 inches, you're automatically going to be an oversized. Over certain pounds, you're going to be in this category automatically. So you need to understand what category items fit into, but then go on Seller Central, go on Amazon's site, and find out exactly based on, okay, my product is this, here's the dimensions of the product, right? And this is what Amazon weighs them at, and we'll talk about that in a second here too. And this is exactly what my FBA fee will be. Also make sure you're calculating right. Amazon will take the greater dimensional weight or unit weight for most size tiers, so make sure you're calculating that correctly. Again, there's a whole calculation of things that can be done on this. But when Amazon gets a new product into its warehouse that's never been in there, they're going to put that what's on a QB-scan machine, and they're going to laser measure that length, width, height, and the weight of the item. And that's how Amazon determines. So the way you send it to Amazon is the way they're going to measure it. And so you need to understand, again, the impacts of all this, because that directly impacts your cost, what you're going to be charged, your fulfillment fee. And then we talk about, brands talk about like bundling items, right? So if I'm going to take 2 or 3 or 10 or whatever of an item, put them together, or I'm going to take 3 like items and put them together as a bundle. How am I packaging those? Just like you see in a retailer, right? Like let's say you go to Costco and you've got the ketchup, mustard, relish, mayonnaise, maybe all kind of in one pack. Look at how that's packaged. That's packaged very strategically to maximize shelf space, the storage, everything like that. The same thing happens at Amazon. You want to be very strategic on how you package that stuff together. So number one, it's going to minimize your cost. But number two, it's not going to impact the quality of any of those items. Nothing's going to break or shift or anything like that. And then if you're designing a new product, let's say, keep Amazon in mind. A lot of brands, it's an afterthought for them if they design this great product, they design the packaging, and yeah, they're thinking about e-commerce, but they're not really thinking about Amazon in particular. More and more brands think about e-commerce now when they design packaging. So all of a sudden they get to Amazon and they're like, oh, we didn't expect that this might cause an issue, and we could have fixed that in step 3 4 months ago. So again, when you're designing new products, designing packaging for those products, think about the customer experience. Think about an e-commerce customer experience. Think about the prep required. Again, is it going to require certain labels? Can you even have those labels just printed on the box itself, that unique barcode that Amazon has? There's a lot of considerations to be made, and unfortunately, things just keep changing. There's been a lot of changes even in the last couple of years with the whole FBA program. So as we sit here in the middle of 2022, there's been some changes with the FBA program in the last few years. First of all, the whole COVID pandemic caused Amazon to actually delay the typical annual fee increase that happens with their Fulfillment by Amazon fees. So they delayed it 6 months, I believe it was. I think it was May of 2021 or June of 2021. Then they increased fees about 6 months later, as they typically do on their normal schedule in January, February timeframe of 2022. Amazon, just like UPS, FedEx, USPS, all increase their rates every year. Amazon does the exact same thing. And especially with inflation, unfortunately, Amazon's having to pay more for labor, more for warehousing, everything else, right? Everything's getting more expensive. So unfortunately, that'll just get passed on to brands, and brands need to make sure they understand that impact. There are so many brands that we've worked with over the years that have kept their selling price the same, but their margins keep getting smaller and smaller because their FBA fees, keep increasing and increasing. Most recently, though, Amazon just last month, on April 28th, 2022, announced that they were implementing a 5% surcharge on all FBA fees. Keep in mind, this is a 5% on top of just the FBA fee. So not 5%. If you're selling a $100 item, it's not $5. It's 5% increase on just the Fulfillment by Amazon fee, and that's like a fuel surcharge because of the high gas prices in the United States. That just goes to show that Amazon's passing those costs along now to the sellers of the items, and sellers need to adjust, and they need to determine, like, are we going to pass on this cost to our customers, or are we just going to minimize our own margins? And there's no, again, right or wrong answer. Every brand is different, but it's important to stay ahead of these changes and ahead of the communications on these and plan for these as they happen. So let's say you're an established company that's been selling on Amazon, or maybe you're a new company, you're looking to sell onto Amazon. How do you put all this into practice? How do you understand exactly what success looks like with this? Number one, you need to understand these size tiers. Amazon's made it a little easier the last couple of years, but before they had about 3 different pages, 3 different charts. You had to kind of print them out or look at them side by side to understand, okay, this size tier, this category. And there's lots of different other variants I haven't even talked about in terms of clothing's a little different. Talking about like hazardous materials, those are a little different. So there's some different caveats. Make a point to sit down an afternoon and really dig through these fees, understand, read through all the rules and regulations and how Amazon's charging for these. It's really important to understand those size tiers, understand those costs. Then also, let's say you're already selling on Amazon, you want to audit your current dimensions and weight that Amazon weighed and what the dimensions and weights to your actual product. So you can actually download a fulfillment report from Amazon's back end. It'll tell you the 3-dimensional sides of your product, and that's what Amazon's weighed them and measured them as. You can actually ask for a remeasurement on items. But the other biggest thing is you got to watch for fee changes. So what'll happen is Amazon will actually sometimes reweigh and remeasure items on their own. Or maybe you're dealing with third-party sellers that also sell your items on the platform. They've sent it in a different packaging or prep configuration than what you sell it as. And all of a sudden Amazon's using their configuration as the overall measurement for the product. Because keep in mind, these measurements at a product level, not at a seller level. So if you have 20 people selling the same item, let's say it's the item everybody can get in the country at any major store, right? And so you've got these resellers just buying it on clearance and reselling it. Everybody could be sitting in 20 different ways, packaged different, prepped differently, whatever it may be. Maybe Amazon's taking this, choice on how the item's packaged and prepped. So you got to watch for those changes. So Amazon will change them on you and they will not inform you proactively. So you got to have to audit those changes. If you understand that, if you understand those margins and how that affects that, you're going to stay ahead of your competition, which is a big part of Amazon, right? You got to stay ahead of them, understand your costs, understand your margins, and ultimately you're going to win in the end.